Lexa, 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 shouted the crowd around me as I finished my speech. I had been preparing 3 months for these last 2 minutes, and yet I couldn't have felt more unprepared. I knew I always had everything under control, and people knew it as well, but sometimes it didn't feel that way. Yet I was not planning to let it show. But of course there was my mom. She always made sure everything was fine. Just looking at her in the first row of the crowd made me calm. She was my world, and the only world I needed, at least since my dad and my sister died. That's why I decided to do what I do, to follow his footsteps and make them proud from wherever they were watching me. All I had ever dreamed for since that moment was going to become true in several hours. I knew that the other candidates were no competition for me, but results were still to come in. Now I just had to sit down and wait. That night, I got home late and tired, yet I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep due to the nerves of the elections. I walked into my apartment, and surprisingly, Dave was there. I hugged him tightly and kissed him. I hadn't seen him in 2 days or so, because of the new investigation he was working on in the lab. As I kept walking through the living room and into the kitchen, I saw an elegant setup on the table. There were candles and roses placed neatly on top of a beautiful white tablecloth. The food looked exquisite, probably more than it actually was because I hadn't eaten in hours. At first, I was confused, and I could tell he noticed the fussed look on my face, and then suddenly it came to me. Today was our 3rd-year anniversary. I smiled and hugged him. As we were having dinner, I received a call, an unusual one indeed. It was current Vice President Clark Ford. What was so important that will involve him calling at these hours? I answered, "Yes, hello," with a doubtful tone. He answered back with the calmest voice. "Good night, Mrs. Rivers. How are you doing?" His almost cheerful voice creeped me out, since he was always so serious. Dave looked at me and asked, "Who is it?" in a whispering voice. I put my hand over the speaker and told him, as Clark kept talking on the other side of the line. The call was short, and when I finished, I explained to Dave what the call had been about. Vice President Ford had called me to tell me about the votes. The count was down to its last 4 million votes, and for my surprise, Nathan White was ahead of me by 2.5 million votes. I suddenly felt sick and like I was about to faint. Dave took me to the couch and spoke to me softly, pointing out that I could still win and trying to make me feel better. But that wasn't what had me preoccupied. Ford asked for something else, I said. He told me that he would make sure that I won, with one condition. I gave an uneasy look. "Well, what is it?" he asked me. Ford had told me that he would help me, but with a prize. I had no doubt that I wanted to win, but would this be worth winning for? The next morning, we both woke up early, even though I didn't really sleep, and it turns out that Dave didn't either. I got ready to head over to the office. I put on my finest outfit since it wasn't a regular day at all. I buttoned my shirt, zipped my skirt, and put on my heels. Dave looked at me like it was the first time. "You're gorgeous, and I'm sure you'll win." I smiled, but my head drove back to the conversation we had last night. Trying not to overthink, I asked about his job. He was a scientist. Ever since he can remember, he wanted to be one. He told me about the new project that they were working on. It was something about following up an investigation of Niels Bohr, apparently some scientists from the 20s that worked on the atomic bombs. I listened, but I didn't really pay attention since I had so much on my mind. We left the apartment together, and each one headed towards their car. I could smell the new car scent all over it. My mom had bought it for me a few weeks ago. I had always wanted a black Porsche, and now I had it. As I saw Dave's BMW leave seconds before me, I dialed Clark. I didn't even know what I would say, but I knew I had to say something. By this time, the votes were probably all counted, but they wouldn't be announced until this afternoon. "Well, hi again, Miss Rivers," said Clark in the same exact voice as yesterday. "Have you decided what you would do about my offer of contributing to your campaign?" I couldn't believe he would call that a contribution. "Yes, of course I have," I said. "I always know what's best for me. I thought you knew better. It actually disappoints me that you think I will take the deal." I responded with my sassy usual voice. "I know you perfectly, and that's exactly why I did it. You would do anything to win, and we both know that. But don't take it personally. You were never expected to win either way." That was the worst thing that someone could ever say to me. I was ready to jump at him, but decided to keep my anger to myself. "Well, you were wrong. I might be competitive, but I'm not corrupted like you." I hung the phone and not giving him any chance to respond. What he didn't know is that I had talked to Chloe, my secretary, and she had found out for me that the votes were not as he said, and that I was obviously ahead. I met up with my mom at the White House. Everything was prepared for the great announcement that would be made at 2 p.m. There was a table with delicious food and a couple bottles of champagne. That would be the last meal before the new president was elected. As we made the way through lunch, talking to different people at the table, the time got closer. The less time there was left, the more anxious I got. And suddenly, there was 20 minutes. We went outside the White House, each candidate with their winning speech in hand. And then I received a call from Dave. He was probably watching me from the lab through the news. But why would he call? I answered quickly. I knew something was wrong because he knew better than to call me at this moment. His voice was frantic, and unexpectedly, he wasn't watching me, since he had instantly asked me if I had won yet as I answered the phone. I didn't have much time, so I tried to hurry the words out of his mouth, but it seemed that he was too nervous. So was I. I had to be up on stage in 5 minutes, and everyone was waving at me to hurry up and hang the phone. And then suddenly he said it, something that I would have never expected. At first, I didn't understand why it would concern me. But as I listened to what he was yelling through the phone, I understood why I had to know. There was an accident in the lab. Remember the scientist, Niels Bohr, from my research I had mentioned to you this morning? He said, yet he didn't give me the chance to answer. Well, he was a physicist who studied atomic structure and discovered the atomic model. He went on. This was the part where I was confused, where I was wondering what that had to do with me. But it didn't. More specifically, it had to do with my position. Well, soon-to-be position, of course. We were following up to his research and doing some experiments ourselves based on his theories and discoveries. And we had an issue. There was a breach in the confidential biohazard lab. Apparently, some of the atomic samples have been stolen, and we have been notified that the thieves are planning to make a nuclear bomb. If this bomb goes off, if it hasn't yet, the entire USA and maybe some countries nearby may become totally radioactive in less than 3 days, and all life would die. He went silent, and so did I. What was I even supposed to do? I saw all the crowd cheering with banners and the rest of the members of the campaign looking at me and telling me to come out. I was frozen, but I had to react. I have to go. I'll call you as soon as I can, and I promise I will do something about this. I hung up, not even wanting to hear what he may have to say. I took a deep breath and walked into the stage. The cheers became louder, and the clock was down to 1 minute. I didn't even know what to think or what I would do. Those words had totally taken me off of myself, and it wasn't the right time at all. My palms were getting sweatier by the second, and I was distracted, until they saved my knee through the microphone. The cheers became 10 times louder, and the campaign manager signaled me to step forward and say a few words. All I could think about was the call, but the chanting only got louder, making me take the stand. Hello, everyone. I'm extremely grateful and honored that I've been chosen for this position. I didn't really want to say that. It felt like it was shallow, something that everyone said, but I was too distracted to even think straight. I want to thank all the people that supported me and voted for me. It really means a lot. I looked at the clock. Time was passing, and the future of the world was practically in my hands. Well, I want to make this short, so thank you again and promise I won't let you down. That was more of a reminder to myself. I had a commitment, a duty, and now a responsibility to save, literally, the entire world. As I went down the stage, Clark's eyes followed me everywhere. My phone rang and Dave's name appeared on the screen. Congrats, honey. His voice sounded sad, worried, and in the same way disappointed. Thanks. I know I have to deal with a lot, but I have it under control. Don't worry about me. I usually had everything under control, and I'd like to think that I had this one too. Lexa, you didn't have to pretend. You can ask for help. I can help you, he said, knowing that I would have a hard time doing this by myself. Dave, if I need help, you know that I'll ask for it. Thanks for offering. I want to try and solve this as secret as possible. I don't want anyone to panic. Thanks for the call. See you at home. And with that, I hung up the phone, not letting him say goodbye. I shook every candidate's hand and talked with the White House staff. I couldn't believe that I forgot about the sample for a moment. It felt good not remembering that we could all disappear at any time the thieves wanted. The manager of the staff, Alan, showed me and my mom my new office and home. The presidential office was larger than my living room and kitchen in my apartment with Dave. It had the country's flag on one side and the U.S. symbol on the floor, right in front of my shiny wooden big new desk. I felt weirdly at home, and it was a pleasant feeling. I sat in my chair, kicked my mom out of the room, and started coming up with ideas on how to face this soon-to-be disaster. I considered telling the Congress, but I knew it would do more harm than good. My next option was to tell someone close to me like my mom, but she would freak out and it wouldn't help me solve this. The best option was to keep this to myself for as long as I possibly could, until of course I was in desperate need for help. I looked at the clock next to me, 2:30 p.m. I sighed and buried my face in my hands. My head was full of 1,000 thoughts that seemed to be yelling at each other. I grabbed a pen and a piece of paper and started writing everything that came to mind. Who could possibly have stolen the samples? 1. Terrorist. That's the only thing that came to my mind. But then my hand picked up the pen and wrote 2. Clark Ford. I stared at the paper for what seemed like eternity, trying to piece together what I just wrote. Why did I think that? Is it true? Then my phone rang. Hello? I said. Mrs. Rivers, it's Clark. I just wanted to congratulate you. What? Clark Ford was congratulating me? I was confused, but mostly surprised. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate the call. The other line was silent, and I knew that he was thinking about what to say next. Are you busy in your office? I mean, does being the president give you breaks? I frowned and looked around. I had the feeling I was being watched. Well, sort of. I'm just trying to get settled in. Look, I have to go. Thanks again, I said, trying to end this as soon as possible. Of course. Goodbye, he said, and I hung up. The afternoon was a nightmare. I didn't leave my office during the entire day, and I felt like I was losing control over the situation. I looked back at the clock, 6:18. I went over to the big fluffy black couch and laid my head on a pillow. Next thing I knew, I was falling asleep. Suddenly, an image flashed before me, a white lab coat and a card, an entrance card with Dave's name on it. I jumped and noticed my hands were shaking. You're nervous, Lexa. It's probably something you're making up. Try to relax. I repeated in my head. As I repositioned myself, another picture appeared clearly on my mind. I was holding a box, a silver metal box with a biohazard warning on it. I stood up as fast as I could, and I knew that this time it wasn't my brain making this up. I stared at my hands. They were pale and shaking. I sat on the floor and took 3 deep, slow breaths. I went to grab my purse, and another image appeared. I was in my car. I recognized it because of the sticker I had glued to my window. I was driving, and next to me was the box. The strange, metal, dangerous box. I started to panic. I was feeling dizzy, and I heard my phone ring. It was Dave. I ignored the call because I knew that once I picked up the phone, I would tell him everything. I wanted to know what was going on, so I closed my eyes and tried to remember the facts. I grabbed a notepad and started. Number 1. The samples were stolen the night before the elections. Number 2. I was with Dave that night. Number 3. The lab closes at 7 and I was home at that time. Number 4. I don't remember falling asleep. What if I never fell asleep? I started thinking harder than I ever thought in my life, and trust me, I think a lot. Where would I put something so valuable? The storage unit. I ran to my car and started driving. I was distracted the whole time, but as I parked in front of the units, one more flash appeared. I was walking towards the building with my car keys, the box, and a bottle of dark red shiny liquid. I froze. I didn't know if I was ready to open the door. Lexa, if you did it, you have to know. And with that thought, I opened the big heavy metal door. I gasped as I saw what was in front of me. Tears formed in my eyes. I did it. I stole the samples. The box was sitting perfectly in an old wooden table that was in our old apartment. I did this to myself. I ran to the box and stared at it. Another image formed in my brain. I was leaving the laboratory with again the bottle of strange liquid. What did I do? Am I in big trouble? At least I know who did it. So, it means that I have now full control? What am I going to do? That's true. I had control, but that didn't mean anything more. I grabbed the box, sprinted to my car, locked the door, and rested my head on the steering wheel. I started my car and drove back to the White House. I was driving, but I wasn't there. I was so deep in my thoughts that I almost crashed 2 cars while on the freeway. I arrived and saw that car that I've never seen before on the entrance. I slowed down and parked a few feet away from it. I grabbed the box, that was as little as a gift box, and shoved it in my briefcase. I entered my office, and there he was, leaning against my desk in his tailored Tom Ford suit. Miss Rivers, I'm impressed to say the least. Clark said, Great, another thing to deal with. Mr. Ford, hello to you too. I said, that using my sassy voice that I noticed was blending with my scared voice. You're smarter than I thought. You almost forgot, he said. Forgot about what? He knew, I thought. Forgot about what's in that briefcase. Don't act stupid. You know what I'm talking about. He was right. I was acting stupid. You did this to me. You drugged me and made me steal this. I never even thought about the possibility of him being involved. But when those words left my mouth, they made a lot of sense. He was shocked and I was right. Tell me what happened now, I said, and this time I wasn't pretending to use my angry voice. It came out naturally. He sighed. It was the night before the elections. I was home and furious with you. You were going to kick me out of the government. I was going to lose my job forever. I knew you and Dave were going to celebrate your anniversary, so I pretended to be the chef and cook your food at my house and send it over to yours. I was listening closely and squinting my eyes, letting him know that I was more than angry. I cooked your meal and gave you pills to drug you. They make you forget everything. I got that I'm a psych ward. He said this like it was the most normal thing in the world. And there was nothing normal about this situation. A psych ward? You're insane, I said. Well, yelled. Let me finish, Miss Rivers. I gave you that. And wine, which is technically a drug that is mixed with water. This is used to regulate your emotions and sleep. So the bottle that I remember having was a drug? I asked with a tear coming down my cheek. Why would you do this to me? I haven't done absolutely anything to you. I felt impotent. I did this for me. I don't care about you. You had a chance of winning a job, and I was losing it. The anger was visible in his eyes, and I started to feel scared. He had already drugged me, and I had a reason to. I remember a lab coat and a card, I said, taking a few steps back toward the door. Oh yes, you took your husband's access card. Clever. You see, I only gave you that drug, an address to the lab, the security camera password so you can delete the evidence, and the directions to the box. Aside from that, the other part was all you. President, he said in a cruel, scary tone of voice. You're completely sick. Drugging a person and making them steal something so fragile and valuable shows who you truly are. You're a selfish, evil, and twisted person. You don't care about others. You put the whole world's safety into danger because you can't find a job. Do you know how crazy that sounds? It sounds exciting to me. Having that type of power is something that I always wanted until you came around. I was going to run for president, and you, Mrs. Rivers, took the last spot in the candidate list. He was walking towards me and took out a knife. My eyes got wide as he admired it and ran his pale, squalid, bony fingers around the blade. I turned around and grabbed the first thing that I could find to defend myself, a lamp. I know it's nothing compared to a knife, but bear with me. You're going to rot in jail, Clark Ford, I said. You have no evidence. I'm a free man. I took out my phone. I started recording the conversation the minute he said hello. He didn't notice, of course. So Clark Ford wasn't a free man. His hands started shaking and running towards me. I yelled for help, and the police from the White House entered the office. They grabbed him and took his knife. I handed them the recording and the samples. Clark Ford, you are under arrest for the robbery of biohazard samples and manipulation of health care without a license. You have the right to remain silent. As they took him away, Dave entered the room and ran towards me and gave me a tight hug that seemed to last forever. I'm so sorry, Dave. I should have told you when I started having those flashbacks. You deserved the truth. I failed you. I completely understand if you don't want to talk to me ever again. I was crying. I couldn't help it. There is a possibility that I could lose him. Oh, Lexa, I love you so much. I understand this was a shock, and I wouldn't know how to handle it either. I should have been there for you. I'm sorry. He was apologizing for something that wasn't his fault. Dave, don't apologize. Let's just promise each other that if something like this happens, we must tell the other person, okay? I said, smiling. Yes, promise. He kissed me and I hugged him until the policeman asked to talk to me. After I gave my testimony, I sat outside the rose garden. I looked at the sunrise. I couldn't believe what just happened to me. I felt stronger, powerful, and relieved in some way. I felt like after I faced this challenge, I could face anything that life threw at me. I felt tired, but alive and happy. I hope that someday you grow as I did today. It truly gives you a new outlook on this journey we call life. And remember, you have control over everything when you use it and take it. It is completely
Hi, I'm Adriana
up to
Martinez,
you.
and I wrote the story The False Alarm. When I was told by my teacher that I need to include a scientist in my story, I knew straight away that I wanted to involve Niels Bohr. He was a Danish physicist who made foundational contributions to the understanding of atomic structure and the quantum theory. I've always found this topic very interesting and had no doubts about the scientist and the discoveries I was choosing to use in my story. This story is inspired in my all-time favorite series, The 100. The series is placed 100 years into the future after an atomic war between China and the US that ends up destroying the entire planet, making it radioactive and therefore inhabitable for life. I wanted to make this story similar, but also wanted my characters to have a chance of preventing the actual atomic explosion. I think that my partner's work at completing the story was totally astonishing, even though I was not expecting that ending. I think it gave it a real twist to the story, and it completed my idea of giving the characters a chance of preventing the explosion. Thanks, and I hope you enjoyed my story.